The invitation arrived on a Tuesday morning, cream-colored and elegant, with her sister's perfect calligraphy announcing the engagement party that would change everything. Maya Hartwell stared at it like it was a ticking bomb, her coffee growing cold in her hand. 5 years. 5 years of telling her family she was doing just fine in Boston, that her career was thriving, that she had someone special. 5 years of carefully constructed half-truths that were about to explode in her face because her sister's engagement party was in 2 weeks, and she had promised to bring her long-term boyfriend who didn't exist. The panic started small, like a flutter in her chest, then grew into something that made her hands shake as she scrolled through her phone contacts. Who could she possibly ask to pretend to be her boyfriend for an entire weekend in front of her judgmental mother, her successful siblings, and every family friend who had watched her grow up? The answer was simple and terrifying: no one. She had moved to Boston 3 years ago to escape the suffocating expectations of her small Connecticut hometown, throwing herself into her work as a graphic designer with such intensity that her social life had withered to near nothing. She had work colleagues, gym acquaintances, the barista who knew her order, but no one she could trust with this desperate, humiliating favor. If you believe in second chances, in the messy, complicated ways we try to protect ourselves and the people we love, please hit that like button, leave a comment sharing your thoughts, and subscribe to this channel. This story is about to take you on an emotional journey you won't forget. That's when she met Ethan Kross, though met wasn't quite the right word. Collided was more accurate. She'd been walking past the construction site near her apartment, so lost in her spiraling thoughts that she didn't notice the ladder being carried across the sidewalk until she walked straight into it. The paint, that had been balanced on top, came crashing down, covering her favorite jacket in pale blue latex. The man holding the ladder set it down immediately, his face a mask of genuine horror as he took in the damage. He was tall, with dark hair that fell across his forehead, and eyes that were in startling shade of gray-blue, wearing a faded Red Sox t-shirt and jeans covered in various colors of paint splatters. What happened next surprised her. Instead of the fumbling apology she expected, he started laughing, a rich, warm sound that somehow made the situation less catastrophic. Then he offered to buy her a new jacket. Insisted on it, actually, and somehow within the span of 20 minutes she found herself sitting in a coffee shop with this stranger who introduced himself as Ethan, telling him everything. The words just poured out of her. The lies she had told, the pressure from her family, the sister who had always been perfect, the mother who couldn't understand why Maya wasn't married yet at 29. And this engagement party that loomed like a sentencing. Ethan listened with an intensity that made her feel like she was the only person in the world. Then he said something that changed everything. "I'll do it. I'll be your boyfriend for the weekend." She laughed because surely he was joking, but his expression remained serious, those unusual eyes steady on hers. He explained that he understood family pressure, that he had his own complicated history with expectations and disappointment, and that maybe they could help each other out. He seemed so genuine, so kind, that against every instinct screaming at her that this was insane, Maya said yes. The 2 weeks before the party became a crash course in creating a believable relationship. They met every evening after work, trading life stories in coffee shops and park benches, learning the small details that couples know about each other. Ethan told her he had grown up in South Boston, that he ran his own small construction company specializing in historic home restoration, that his mother had died when he was 15 and his father had never quite recovered. He shared that he loved old movies, that he couldn't cook to save his life but made excellent coffee, that he had a scar on his left shoulder from falling off a roof when he was learning the trade. Every detail felt real, felt true, and Maya found herself looking forward to their meetings with an eagerness that had nothing to do with the impending deception. She told him about her own life, the real version she had never shared with her family, How she had left her job at her father's insurance company to pursue design, how she lived in a tiny studio apartment with a view of a brick wall but loved it because it was hers, how she felt like a failure every time she went home because she didn't have the husband and house and conventional success her family valued. Ethan listened to all of it without judgment, and somewhere in those 2 weeks, the pretense started to feel less like pretense and more like possibility. The drive to Connecticut was supposed to be awkward, but instead felt natural, with Ethan driving his well-worn pickup truck while they listened to a playlist he had made of songs from the 90s, both of them singing along badly and laughing. He reached over at one point and took her hand, and even though no one was watching, even though it was just for practice, Maya felt her heart skip in a way that terrified her. This was supposed to be fake. This was supposed to be helping each other out. But the warmth of his hand in hers felt more real than anything she had experienced in years. Her family home appeared exactly as she remembered, a large colonial with perfectly manicured lawns and her mother's prize-winning roses lining the driveway. Her sister Rachel stood on the front steps, radiant and perfect in white linen, her arm linked with her fiancé David, a corporate lawyer with an impressive resume and an even more impressive trust fund. Maya felt Ethan squeeze her hand gently as they got out of the truck, and she drew strength from that simple gesture. Her mother descended on them immediately, her sharp eyes taking in every detail of Ethan's appearance. Maya held her breath, but Ethan was perfect. He was charming without being obsequious, respectful without being stiff, and he looked at Maya with such genuine warmth that even her mother's suspicious expression softened. The weekend unfolded like a carefully choreographed dance. Ethan played his role flawlessly at the rehearsal dinner, making her father laugh with stories about restoration disasters, complimenting her mother's cooking, treating Rachel with the easy friendliness of someone who genuinely liked people. But it was the small moments that undid Maya. The way he kept his hand on the small of her back as they moved through the crowded party. The way he looked at her when he thought no one was watching, with an expression that seemed too real to be acting. The way he defended her when her uncle made a snide comment about her career choice, his voice calm but firm as he explained that Maya's design work was actually thriving, even though he had no way of knowing if that was true. On Saturday night, after the engagement party had wound down and most guests had left, Maya found herself alone with Ethan on the back porch of her family home. The summer air was thick with the scent of her mother's roses, and fireflies danced in the darkness beyond the porch lights. She should have been relieved that they had pulled it off, that her family believed their act completely, that by tomorrow afternoon they could drive back to Boston and go their separate ways. Instead, she felt a growing dread at the thought of losing him, even though she had never really had him at all. That's when Ethan turned to her with an expression that made her breath catch. "Maya, I need to tell you something," he said, and the seriousness in his voice made her heart sink. Here it comes, she thought. The truth about why he had really agreed to this crazy scheme. "I haven't been completely honest with you." The words hung in the air between them, and she braced herself for whatever revelation was coming. She had known this was too good to be true, that no stranger would just agree to spend a weekend pretending to be her boyfriend without some ulterior motive. What Ethan told her next shattered and rebuilt her understanding of the entire situation. He explained that his construction company was struggling, that he had taken on a massive historic renovation project that was underwater financially, that he had been about to lose everything when an investor had approached him out of nowhere with a buyout offer that seemed too good to be true. That investor was David, her sister's fiancé. David had recognized Ethan's work, had been impressed by his craftsmanship and vision, and had mentioned in passing during their business discussions that his future sister-in-law was quite successful in Boston. Ethan had been curious, had looked Maya up, had seen her design portfolio, and had been genuinely impressed. When the paint can incident happened, he had recognized her immediately. But here was the part that made Maya's head spin. David had asked Ethan to do him a favor, had suggested that Maya might need someone to bring to the engagement party, had even offered to sweeten their business deal if Ethan would help out. Ethan had agreed initially for the business reasons, for the chance to save his company and his employees' jobs. Everything he had told her about his life was true, but the reason he had agreed to help her was based on a business arrangement orchestrated by her future brother-in-law. Maya felt like the ground had dropped out from under her. It had all been a setup, a transaction, another way her family had tried to manage her life and fix what they perceived as her failures. The humiliation was crushing, made worse by the fact that she had started to develop real feelings for this man who had been essentially paid to pretend to care about her. She stood up, ready to storm inside, to confront David, to pack her things and leave immediately. But Ethan caught her hand, his grip gentle but firm. "Wait, please let me finish," he said, and something in his voice made her pause. "David approached me, yes. He offered me a business incentive, yes. But Maya, I lied about why I agreed to help you. I didn't do this for the business deal. I did it because from the moment I looked you up, from the moment I saw your work and read about your journey, I was intrigued. And then I met you, covered in paint and completely panicked. And you were so real, so honest about your flaws and fears, and I knew I wanted to know you better. The paint can incident wasn't staged, but I could have just apologized and walked away. Instead, I saw an opportunity to spend time with you, and I took it. I told David I would help, but I turned down his business incentive. The deal we made was purely about my company's merits, nothing more." He took a breath, and in the dim light of the porch, his eyes were impossibly sincere. "These past 2 weeks have been the best 2 weeks I've had in years. Getting to know you, learning about your dreams and your fears, seeing how talented and brave you are to have left everything familiar to build the life you wanted. It made me realize how much I had let my own life become small and safe. I lied about my initial motivation, Maya. I lied about turning down a business advantage to help you, but I didn't lie about anything else. I didn't lie about how much I enjoy talking to you, about how your laugh makes my entire day better, about how looking at you feels like coming home. I didn't lie about my feelings because they're the only real thing in this whole mess. If this story has touched your heart, if you've ever felt the fear of being vulnerable or the hope of unexpected connection, please take a moment to like this video and share it with someone who needs to hear this message. Your support means everything. Maya stood there, her mind racing through every moment of the past 2 weeks, with this new information coloring everything. She remembered how Ethan had looked at her that first day in the coffee shop, the way he had leaned in when she talked like her words were precious. She thought about how he had made that playlist, how he had remembered that she mentioned loving 90s music in passing. She recalled the way he had stood up for her to her uncle, defending a career he knew almost nothing about simply because it was hers. And she realized that while the beginning might have been orchestrated, everything that had grown between them was organic and real. "Why didn't you just ask me out normally?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Ethan smiled, that warm, slightly self-deprecating smile that made her insides melt. "Because a woman like you, accomplished and beautiful and brave enough to rebuild her entire life, wouldn't have looked twice at a guy covered in paint who almost ruined her jacket. But a woman who was desperate enough to accept help from a stranger? That woman might give me a chance to show her who I really was." Maya laughed then, a sound that was half sob, half genuine amusement at the absurdity of it all. "You're an idiot," she said, but there was no heat in the words. "You could have just asked." Ethan stepped closer, close enough that she could see the paint stains on his hands that he had tried unsuccessfully to scrub away for her family's party. "Can I ask now? Can I ask if, when we drive back to Boston tomorrow, it's as two people who want to see where this goes? No pretense, no lies, just us figuring out if what we have is as real as it feels?" She looked up at him, this man who had entered her life through chaos and deception, but who had somehow become the most honest thing in it. She thought about how he had made her laugh when she was drowning in anxiety, how he had listened without judgment to all her fears and insecurities, how he had fit so naturally into her life that it terrified her to think about going back to the way things were before. She thought about how sometimes the best things come from the most unlikely circumstances, how connection can grow in the spaces between truth and lies, and how the heart knows what it wants, even when the mind is screaming that it doesn't make sense. Drop a comment right now if you believe Maya should give Ethan a real chance. Let us know what you would do in her situation. Yes, Maya said, and the smile that broke across Ethan's face was worth every moment of confusion and hurt. He pulled her into his arms, and she let herself melt into the embrace, feeling the solid warmth of him, the steady beat of his heart against her ear. Behind them, through the window, she could see her family gathered in the living room, probably discussing her and her mysterious boyfriend, and for once, she didn't care what they thought. For once, she was living her own life, making her own choices, even if those choices were messy and complicated and started with a lie. As they stood there wrapped in each other, Maya realized that sometimes the most honest thing you can do is admit you were pretending. And sometimes the bravest thing you can do is trust someone who started by deceiving you. Life wasn't the neat, perfect story her family wanted for her. It was complicated and messy, full of false starts and unexpected turns, paint-stained hands and staged relationships that turned into something real. And maybe that was okay. Maybe that was better than okay. Maybe that was exactly what she had been looking for all along, even if she hadn't known it until a man with lies on his lips and truth in his eyes had walked into her life and changed everything. The ending wasn't perfect, and there would be conversations to have with David about his interference, explanations owed to her family eventually, and the complicated work of building something real from a foundation of deception. But as Ethan kissed her forehead gently and whispered that he couldn't wait to see what came next, Maya felt something she hadn't felt in years. Hope. Real, genuine, terrifying hope that maybe she had found something worth the risk, something worth the potential hurt, something worth believing in. He had lied about everything except the one thing that mattered most, and in the end, that was enough. It was more than enough. It was everything.